Good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Beth Moylan. I'm the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Experiential Learning here at McGeorge, and I would like to welcome you all to our 5th annual Legislative Leaders Speakers Series. That's a lot of L's and S's. And Professor O'Neill loves alliteration, and I love Professor O'Neill, so I will work with all of those L's and S's on her behalf. So on behalf of our dean and our faculty and our community, we are so excited to be able to welcome Senator Angelique Ashby, also an alum who we are so proud to call a McGeorge grad, and we're so happy to have her here tonight. I'm also so excited that we have been doing this particular series for 5 years. Some of you have been to all of them, I hear. Some of our alums who are here tonight have been to every single one. And it's a great opportunity to showcase our Capitol Center. Professor O'Neill is the director of our Capitol Center. She does an amazing job. She also teaches our Capitol Lawyering and Lawmaking class, and she teaches in our Global Lawyering Skills program. So she does everything, and she's, all of these events that we've had surrounding the Capitol Center are made better because we have her at the helm as our executive director. We also have our faculty director here tonight, Professor Leslie Jacobs, who holds the Kennedy Chair here and is a constitutional law professor, teaches First Amendment law, and she's been involved with the Capitol Center for a number of years. And we have some great alums. Adjunct Professor Aaron Briano is here. He is teaching in our Legislative and Public Policy Clinic and is also a McGeorge grad. So we have a lot to be proud about in our Capitol realm, and I hope all of you are inspired by the conversation that's going to take place. I'm going to bring Professor O'Neill up. She's going to introduce Caitlin Rader, and then we'll get started with the conversation. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. As Dean Moylan mentioned, this is our 5th annual Capitol Center Legislative Leaders Speaker Series. Lots of alliteration, but as Dean Moylan mentioned, I like that. With Capitol Center, it seems to flow from that, but we have been doing the series for 5 years. It is something that we're really proud of here at McGeorge, and we could not be more proud to be welcoming one of our own home tonight, Angelique Ashby. Senator Angelique Ashby is a McGeorge alum, as Dean Moylan mentioned, and we are very grateful to her for the gift of her time this evening and for sharing her experience and expertise with us. I am the director of the Capitol Center for Law and Policy here at McGeorge and our Capitol Lawyering Concentration, which is a program for students who are interested in careers at the intersection of law and public policy. And I want to thank Dean Moylan, Professor Jacobs. We have several of our Capitol Center board members here this evening. Thank you so much for the support. I see alums and students. So it's great to have our community here together. And to kick off the event this evening, the president of our Capitol Lawyering Association for Students, Caitlin Rader, is going to come up and introduce the senator, and then we will get started with the conversation.
Good evening. My name is Caitlin Rader. I'm a third-year law student and the president of the Capitol Lawyering Association for Students. I feel so incredibly lucky to be here with you tonight to have the opportunity to share in this space provided by Professor Aaron O'Neill and the McGeorge Capitol Center for Law and Policy. Our distinguished guest speaker, California State Senator Angelique Ashby, is back home with us this evening, as it was right here on this campus that Senator Ashby obtained her law degree. Like you and I, Senator Ashby walked these halls as she followed her dreams and saw her commitments through. After she graduated from McGeorge, she immediately went on to engage the surrounding Sacramento community, particularly focused on assisting residents with navigating and implementing solutions to ongoing systemic issues affecting quality of life. Later, she was elected to the Sacramento City Council, where she was the only woman serving for more than half her tenure of 12 years. She served 8 of those years as mayor pro tem, which was record-setting, and she was the only Sacramento City Council member to ever serve as pro tem for that long. Just a couple of years ago, Senator Ashby became the first woman in over 20 years to be elected to represent Sacramento in the California State Senate. She now leads our state as Assistant Majority Leader in the Senate and has most recently been assigned by leadership as the chairperson of the Business, Professions, and Economic Development Committee. I would like to take a moment to thank you, Senator Ashby, for being with us here tonight. It is my honor to introduce you. Everyone, please join me in welcoming California State Senator Angelique Ashby. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, let's stop there. That was a really good,
And it's a wrap.
so far so good.
No, we wanted to start by kind of asking you what got you interested in a career in public service and public office?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me start by saying it is really fun to walk back onto this campus today. I've had the occasion since graduation to come back a couple of times, usually something like this, speaking to the class or group of students or whatever, and it always feels a little bit surreal, like a different life that you lived, and you're kind of coming back to it for a moment. And as you were making the introduction, I was thinking to myself, when I was here, and I'm not sure if this is still the case, but particularly I was in the evening program, there were a lot of people here that were also working at the Capitol and or were in politics. I was not one of them. And if you would have asked that class which one would potentially be a senator later, I certainly would not have voted for myself at that point. I would have had different thoughts about probably where I was going to land. So it is really a special honor and privilege to come and sit here with you this evening. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
So the impetus for you to get involved
Yeah.
in public service, running for office.
So it's a great question. I think, just the best careers, all of them, whether it's law or policy or owning a shop or whatever, I think they come organically. I personally believe that we all have a purpose here, and that the magic happens when you figure out what that purpose is, and then you get the opportunity to pursue it, and then you get to build a team around yourself that helps you go after those goals and the things that you were really born to do. And I'm not sure I ever actively pursued politics, but what I did do was care deeply about my community and found ways I could get involved. At one point, that community was here. I got really involved with the Black Student Association when I was here. Why? Because my study group was a lot of Black students, but none of them were from Sacramento, and I went to Sac High, 2 blocks away, right? And I was a single mom here on food stamps, in low-income housing, using subsidized childcare, and they were not. So some of the people that they were seeking to reach, they didn't know how to find, and it was an honor to me to sort of come alongside that group and help them meet, say, the Greater Sacramento Urban League, or choose an appropriate school where they could show up. I chose Father Keith B. Kinney for them. And so, whatever my community has been, when I left here, my community really became Natomas, a neighborhood, and I got involved. I got involved in the neighborhood association, and I got, working on a stop sign or working on a playground. And of course, I opened a business with my dad and did some work there too, policy type work around reducing recidivism rates or helping foster youth who are transitioning out of care and into adulthood. And each of those things led me closer and closer, I think, to where I needed to be, to where I could effectuate on a larger scale policy one of my internships here, when I was here, was I got to be a public defender. And some of you may have done this experience before or know about this experience or have friends that do it, but it is very hands-on. And what I learned about my own mind at the public defender's office is that I naturally wanted to group people. So, we're either going to talk to 50 different people who got light rail tickets, or we could create a diversion program for like all 50 and streamline the court's time and energy and efforts. And so that's where I started to learn that my brain was a policy brain and not like an individual case-by-case brain. And every place that I worked at a few law firms along the way too while I was here at McGeorge, and each one taught me something, either what I didn't want to do or what I did want to do. And all of those things, I think, led me to a place where I really wanted to be in a position to use my experiences, both as a single mom, as a law student, as a business owner, all of that, to try to parlay that into victories for people who are not often represented. And I'll tell you this story, some of you may have heard it before. I never intended to go to law school either. I was at Davis for undergrad. I was a single mom, and I had a really good friend. I don't know why I always say her name when I tell this story, maybe because I like her name so much, but her name's Shamini Babu. Beautiful Fijian young woman who I met at UC Davis, and she knew she wanted to be a lawyer. And not only does she know she wanted to be a lawyer, and you all know people like this, she's like, I'm going to Pepperdine, and I'm gonna graduate in this many years, and then I'm gonna do this kind of law. And I was like, okay. So UC Davis is a place where, a lot of schools come to recruit, and there was one of the law recruit days, and she asked if I would walk over with her so she could go get whatever paperwork she needed from Pepperdine. So I sat on a bench on the side of the room while Shamini went and talked to Pepperdine, and this really sweet older lady came and sat by me and asked me, are you gonna go to law school? Reasonable question, I'm at the law school recruiting event. And I looked at her like she was crazy. No way, man, but Shamini is, she's gonna go to Pepperdine, I'm waiting for Shamini. And she asked me, why not? Why wouldn't you wanna go to law school? And I told her, well, I'm a single mom, I have a little guy. I think he was probably about 3 at the time. I work full time. I need like one of these things off of my plate. I gotta be done with school or done with something because it's too much. It's too much for one person to handle. And that lady said to me, but still, why don't you want to go to law school? And again, I sort of thought, well, maybe she didn't hear me. And I tried to explain it to her again. And what she ultimately said to me was, well, if people like you never go to law school, then the people that make our policies and our laws never reflect the experiences that people like you have had. That lady was Dean Kelso, and she convinced me to come here and try for a law degree and use my experiences to potentially help people view law and policy from a different perspective and a different angle. And every reason that I gave her why I shouldn't be in this space, she knocked down summarily. Obviously a much better lawyer than me. And so I ended up here, and all of that led me to a place where I was able to use what I learned in the hallways of McGeorge and in those classrooms for the betterment of the people of the state of California.
Sure, no, I love that. The idea, every reason you gave her not to was the reason you actually should.
Right.
Yes.
She made that clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you look at, obviously you represent the Sacramento area.
I do.
And then California as a whole, what do you see as the biggest issues facing California, and how are those paralleled or not in your district?
So Senate districts are actually the largest districts in the state of California. They're larger than congressional districts. They're larger. The only thing that can be a little larger is there are some counties, LA really, and maybe San Diego, where the county supervisorial districts might be a little bit larger, but from a assembly, city, council, Congress, all of that, the largest districts are Senate districts, and they're just about 1 million people each. So 40 senators, about 40 million people in the state of California. So individually, I represent 1 million people here in Sacramento County, all of the city of Sacramento, all of Elk Grove, Rio Linda, Alverta. The district goes out to Madison Avenue, and all that county piece that's all around there, and then run up against Rancho Cordova on that edge. And so individually I'm responsible for Senate District 8, but collectively we serve all of the people of California, which has been just really interesting and exciting from the standpoint that I know Sacramento really well, but I sometimes have to think about, well, how will this work in Red Bluff though, right? You want to pass water policy, that's cool, but how's Palm Desert gonna do it? And something that works in Sacramento and San Diego and San Francisco and LA just might not work in Redding. It might not have the resources. And so pushing, your mind to really look at the issues, not just the issues that face California as a whole, that's easy, homelessness, the economy, public safety, those are always gonna be the top issues. But when we approach the solutions, how do we put together packages of solutions that take into account the broad diversity of the state of California and the resources that each of those individual areas have access to? And for me, that's a really fun part of just stretching my mind as far as I can across as many people and as many situations as I can. But broadly speaking, obviously we have a big problem because we have a budget deficit this year. But I may be a little unusual in this space. I don't always see budget deficits as a problem so much. They can be an opportunity too. California has a lot of money. And so when you have a deficit, you do face the potential of cuts that could be draconian, but you also face the reckoning of what's really, really important to us, just like you do in your own home. I was poor at one point too, and you have to really think about it. What is the thing you need the most though? Not just, what are all the things that you want, let's go get them all, but like, what do you actually need? What are the things that we need to buckle down and really make sure we have available to the people in our state? And I think that the ups and downs of budgets really provide those kinds of opportunities to correct course if we've gone off course. And they also force us for no waste, right? So homelessness, I think everyone would agree in the state of California, is a really big issue. It's also an issue that we spent a lot of money on and had marginal results. So maybe we need to do a better job of looking at what is actually working, where have our dollars been best spent, what is the formula for that? It really forces us to not just throw money at issues, but have to do the hard work of the analysis and being data-driven and partnership-driven to be effective with those dollars because they're precious and rare.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we kind of pulled the lens out from your district to the state, and now we're going to shrink it a little bit back to local government.
Sure.
So you spent 12 years in the city council.
I did.
Council member, vice mayor, mayor pro tem. How would you compare and contrast your experience at local government versus now state government?
Well, I'm gonna be very, very honest with you guys. I can't remember if there's a question answer period at the end, but
There will be.
great. You should ask me whatever you want because I'm brutally honest. So, which is great for people who are trying to make decisions about where to go with your life. At the local level, you can really fix things quickly. Something happened in your neighborhood, the light is out, you need a speed bump, there's not enough bark in your playground park, you need a stop sign, the dog park's a mess, I can fix that. And you feel really good about your ability to deliver that stuff for your constituents. It's very hands-on, you're an implementer at the local level. When you elevate up to the state level, you no longer implement. You have to be really precise because you're creating policies that somebody else is going to implement. A school district, a city council, a group of county supervisors. My favorite example to use is actually not my own, it's Mayor Steinberg's, because obviously he's held all of these positions. We're very good friends, but he loves to tell the story about, he's very famous for addressing mental health issues, and he passed this millionaire's tax, and where he taxed millionaires and took the money and put it into mental health. Great. But if you ask Daryl now, he'll tell you, I really wish I wouldn't have sent all that money to counties, because as a mayor, he couldn't access it. And he spent the last 8 years fighting the county for resources that he actually created as a senator and couldn't implement in the way that he had hoped to be able to use them. So there is this piece. I actually think that legislators do a really good job when they've had some local experience. It doesn't have to be city council. It could be a school board. It could be a SMUD board. My friend Rosanna Herber is here, and she's a candidate for the assembly. I think she would do an amazing job. She has that kind of experience too. But you need to have been held accountable at that very grassroots level to understand that what you're doing at these other levels has significant implications. You can't just be careless with your words. You have to be precise with what your expectations are, and that what you're giving people through legislation will actually allow for the outcomes that you are seeking to achieve. So I think the local level of government is very satisfying. I enjoyed that very much. I got good at it by the end, so I knew where the bodies were buried, and I felt borderline arrogant about my ability to like solve problems at the city level. So going to the state was a humbling experience for me, starting over, being not a big fish in a very large ocean and trying to figure it out, and just it's great. It's a great exercise in humility and also persistence, because it's very overwhelming, all of the intake at the state level. So many committees and commissions. She told you I just got appointed to a committee, and I know we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but each committee is like a master's class in whatever that topic is. And so to try to move from one to the next all in one day is intense.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So thus far, looking back at your time and looking forward, what's been your proudest legislative accomplishment and what's been most challenging?
Well, I've only been a senator for a year. But my greatest, I think, accomplishment in the Senate is easy. It is a Bill 307. It's what we call, it's Michelle, who's here with me from my team. She's also McGeorge alumni, and she's my communications director. We call it the idea I came through the door with. So most people who walk through the door have something they want to do, something that was, an itch they couldn't quite scratch till they could get through that door. And for me, it was foster youth. And my approach at problems is a little bit different. We see a problem here, let's take homelessness, and you'll see a lot of legislators try to legislate in this space. Housing, mental health services, addiction, and you can do that, but it's just my mind doesn't naturally do that. My mind wants to go back upstream and start trying to prevent people from landing in that position. I don't know what it is about me that is why I'm like that. Maybe I feel like there's enough people focused here that I don't need to be there. Like, let the people who are doing that mental health work and that trauma-informed work here do it. My mind says, how can I help prevent them from ever getting there? And so I fixate on that, like absolutely fixate. And some of the biggest predictors are things like half of the people who are homeless in the state of California identify as former foster youth. Half. So we could cut that by 50% if we found another avenue for every kiddo who was formerly a foster youth. Why aren't we doing that? Let's do that. Then this drops by half, right? Something like 70% of the population that are homeless, and a higher number than that are incarcerated, read at a third grade level or lower. California, I've been saying we were dead last, but in this year's report, we're number 2 out of 50 states. That's where we rank, like second from the bottom being the worst, right? So I guess we're 49th out of 50 states in third grade reading levels. That's terrible. We're the wealthiest state. Now, we have extra hurdles that other states don't have. We have far more languages. We have people coming from everywhere. We have real big disparities across our state in terms of access to resources. But I don't care. Even with all of those things, we shouldn't be 49th out of 50th. And literacy is such an indicator of how you'll do in your life's trajectory. So I'm fixated on this. So 2 bills that I passed last year that I think are critically important. One, made college debt-free for all former foster youth in the state of California. Really big deal. And not just their tuition, their housing, their books, everything that it takes. If you're a former foster youth and you did the hard work that it takes to get yourself to a CSU or a UC, then the state of California will meet you there with everything you need. And I think that is a game changer, especially for this group over here that we're trying to knock down. The other thing that I did was passed a bill that said, and by the way, this one I modeled after something I did at the city. Every third grader now in the state of California will have library card before they head off to the summer for 4th grade. This is a really big deal. I did this from a pure place of competition when I was on the city council. The libraries, friendly competition amongst elected officials. Who will have the highest summer reading level? I definitely wanted to beat Elk Grove and everybody else, right? Land Park going down. I'm going to beat you from Natomas. So I went to one of the schools and said to one of the principals who I'm friends with, hey, do you think if we gave all the kids library cards at the school, it would spike our summer reading numbers? He's like, I don't know, let's try it. So we did it. We brought the librarians over. We gave every kid at one school, H. Allen Height, my lowest performing school in my district, library cards, and explained to them what the library was. They got a little presentation. Let's see what happens. I slaughtered everyone else. It was not close. It was like the librarians were like, what in the world happened? That's the only thing I did. That was the one thing I did. And so then I thought to myself, oh, well, what if every kid just knew about the library, right? It worked for one school. I mean, I can't tell you, it was double digits of thousands more children reading than in other parts of the city that historically, like Belle Coolidge, is historically the highest percentage of checkout and rotation and everything. Okay, it's also the wealthiest community, so that tracks. But for Natomas, and North Natomas is like not even isolated, right? There's another library just a few miles away. So for one branch to do that well, something had to be different. So we passed this bill that says that that exact thing will happen, but at every school, in every 3rd grade, in the whole state of California. And my expectation is we'll see similar results.
That's outstanding. My son is actually a kindergarten teacher at Height.
H. Allen Height, great school. Really good one.
So we talked about earlier that you are the only woman to represent Sacramento in the Senate in 20 years, and we're the only woman on city council for a while.
Yeah.
What do you see as issues, kind of key issues facing women politically, and
Yeah.
how has it kind of informed your running for office, serving in public office, all of those kinds of things?
When I first ran for city council, I didn't think about identity politics at all. I don't know if that was just, I was naive or it didn't cross my mind. I don't know why I didn't think about it, but I didn't. But after a while of being there, when I first got on the council, there were other women there. And historically, Sacramento has had a significant number of women, and there have been female majority on the council as early as like the 90s, which is pretty good. In fact, little Sacramento trivia, Luella Johnson, the first woman ever elected to a large city council, we think in the country, but for sure in California, was Sacramento. And so Sacramento has a pretty long history of actually putting women in good spots, but for whatever reason, it fell off at one point. And I watched as every seat on the dais turned to men, and then those seats all turned over too, by the way. But every time they turned, it was just another man that came into the seats. And I ran for mayor unsuccessfully. But after that, you learn a lot more when you lose than when you win. When you win, it's hard to know which thing you did that worked. When you lose, you know exactly what didn't work. And one of the things I realized when I lost was that there wasn't like a network for me. It was just me. And there weren't like other people, like the men when they run, all of their friends come out at their kickoff. And that wasn't happening here. So I set about to change that and started trying to really mentor and really build women up wherever they were at. If I thought they were interested and they were in the community or they were on a school board or whatever, I started really just trying to pour into them. And that has paid off. I mean, the city council now is a majority women, and it is also a majority my mentees that are women. And, you know, there are people running right now for assembly that have sought out my mentorship that would also be firsts in a long time. The truth is, I'm the first woman in more than 2 decades to represent the city of Sacramento as a senator, or actually in the legislature at all. But I'm also only the second woman ever. And the first woman, when she ran, it was more of a rural district than an urban district. So I think what I have learned about gender politics in particular is that the more the pay it is up there, so like school boards will acquiesce that there's no pay there, it doesn't pay well. Small cities where it's like Elk Grove, where it's not like a big pay thing, those places will have lots of women. But once there's like a full-time pay, it's a job, and there's power associated with it, the number of women just drops off, right? So we've actually never had a female mayor since we've had a full-time, full-paid mayor, direct elect mayor. Heather Fargo made that position full-time and then lost. And since then, we've only elected men. And the council became full-time while I was there, too. Significant raise in pay. And then the women fell off, right? And in the Senate and in the legislature, I mean, the numbers are astronomical. Michelle might remember what number I am, but it's something like 57 or something. I'm like the 57th female senator ever in the state of California. And the number for men is like pages long. So we've never hit parity. We've never had a female governor. And I think it's really important. I think representation's really important, but especially when it's so far out of whack that there are like none or only one. I used to think to myself, like, we would go to a parade, and I would think, if I didn't come to this parade today, all of these little girls on the side of the road when the electeds would have went by would have just seen like 2 male supervisors and like a male mayor and 4 or 5 male council members, and they would have just thought, oh, so I can't be an elected official because you have to be a boy to be that. But I was here today, so at least all these girls saw one. Now, I'm not black, I'm not Asian, I'm not old, I'm not young, I'm not a lesbian. There's a lot of things that I am not that if you are sitting on that curb, you might not see in me because I'm just only one coming by in the parade. Then maybe I could be enough for at least some of these girls to feel a reflection of themselves. And that piece right there weighs heavy on your shoulders when you're the only. And I'm sure it would feel that way if you were the only boy, or if you were the only black person, or the only person from the LGBTQ community. Whatever you are, when you are the only, you feel the weight of every, which is impossible.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Recently, speaking of leadership, you were appointed chair of Business Professions and Economic Development. So can you tell us a little bit about the kinds of issues that face that committee and
Yes.
sort of your experience thus far?
I see some people in this room who have been dealing with these committees a lot longer than me, and they can tell you this too, but in the legislature, there are several committees. Some of them are very straightforward, like transportation. You're gonna work on transportation issues. Housing, that's gonna be about housing, right? Public safety, it's gonna be about public safety. It's not to say they're not complicated and that things don't get sticky in there, they do. They get sticky in every committee, but it's very straightforward. There are 4 committees that are just really difficult. One is energy. It's not straightforward at all. It's not just energy. It's a million things around energy, and it's hard and it's challenging. One is called government organizations, which sounds like one thing and is something totally different. It's also like a hodgepodge of everything, basically sin taxes and sin things, right? Horse racing, alcohol, gambling, but also a little side of emergency management. So it's pretty crazy. That one's tough and complicated. And then there's judiciary, which is hard because it's all the laws. It's basically a crash course in everything that we do here, but it's hard and fun to be a part of because you exercise that part of your brain you maybe haven't used since torts. Bring up some term, you're like trying to remember, okay, I think I learned that. I knew that at one point in my life. Let me see if I can unearth it. And so that part's fun. And then the 4th that's really hard is this business professions and economic development. The reason those 4 are so hard is because they're not straightforward. And the issues are complicated and they're complex. And there is a lot on the line. And there's a high level of interest from the outside world in those 4 committees. So business and professions and economic development is the board that oversees all the licenses. And so architects, general contractors, engineers, nurses, doctors, anything that has to do with business and professions, and anything that has to do with economic development. So all of the state's economic development entities like GoBiz, all of those things are under this board. It is an extremely difficult board. I was surprised to get it as a first year. As I often say to my team, I think these people think I'm smarter than I am. And my goal is to not embarrass myself on that board and just see if I can keep pace. Luckily, when you get a board, you inherit really amazing staff that have been there a long time working on those issues, and the B&P staff, which is all female, is second to none. They're extraordinary, and I'm quite honored to be their chair, and it is the first time in the state's history that every member of the B&P team, from the chair all the way through the minority parties consultant, are all female. And that's for business, professions, and economic development. Can you believe it? I mean, that's pretty cool for the state of California to lay that all in the hands of women. So I'm very honored to be a part of that team, and nervous about my own ability to make sure that I can keep all those trains on track. I found out maybe 2 weeks ago that I was going to chair that committee, and then the next day I found out that there was a hearing on compacts with other states that I would have to run a week later, and 7 new bills introduced in my name that are all sunset provisions for a variety of industries that I need to make myself an expert in so that I can explain them to all of my colleagues between now and the end of April. So, yeah, great. Easy.
Right. So you've also become a part of the leadership team for the new Pro Tem.
Yes, I was on the leadership team last year, but I had an assistant whip or something like that. Is that what I was, Michelle? Yeah. But the Senate and the Assembly are not the same in how they handle leadership, but in the Senate, the top person is the pro tem. That person is selected by the rest of the group, and we just had a power shift, a little dynamic there. And I guess I chose wisely and got involved in that race. And then right underneath that person, they pick a majority leader, and then they pick an assistant majority leader. Now, underneath those, there's a lot more leadership, but they're not really involved in the everyday. They're involved in some things, but not everything. Those 3, the pro tem, the majority leader, and the assistant majority leader, those 3 levels really are the leadership for the Senate. And then when they need help with like caucus, then caucus leadership comes in. When they need help with budget and approps, then that leadership comes in. When they need help because the floor assignments are going to be larger, then the whip and all of those other members of the leadership team come in. So I've enjoyed that part. That part is the part that feels the most familiar to me. The sort of lazy part of my brain would like to just do that because it's very vice mayor, which I'm very accustomed to being vice mayor and running around trying to figure out, are you good? Do you have what you need? That person's upset. We got to do to fix that, come back to that, right? And that part of my life has been fairly consistent over 12 years. And that's a space I feel really can just be other things you're trying to do. So, yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you, or condolences, either one works.
So any recommendations for students interested in?
Yeah, so actually my first piece of advice is for anyone who's not thinking about running for office someday. Don't count it out. When I was sitting where you are, I wasn't thinking about it either, nor would I have thought I would be the one. So just remember what Dean Kelso told me. Okay, sure, but if you don't go in, then people like you, then you're not there. And there's a whole group of people like you who'd like you to be there. So that's my first piece of advice. To those of you who are thinking, yeah, I might be interested in running for office someday, my suggestion and my advice to you is get involved. Get involved in 100 ways. Find a candidate that you like and see what it's like to be involved in a campaign. Get involved in your neighborhood. Get involved in a youth sport. Do PTA, I don't care. Pick some leadership role in the community, but don't run for office because you have a law degree. Run for office because you love your community and you want to serve them. And The fact that you have a law degree is gonna make you a great representative for them, but it's not what qualifies you. What qualifies you is having a heart for service. So dig deep and figure out if you have that. Don't do it if you think you're gonna get rich, because you're not. And, you know, I think there's a couple kinds of people that end up in politics. Some of them really crave attention, and some of them really crave to give back. Try to be the latter. Check yourself. Make sure that's your real reason for why you're doing it. And if it feels super good to help other people achieve their goals and help other people solve their problems, if it sounds fun to you to have somebody show up and just like need your help deeply, and you would just fight and fight and fight and fight and fight to help them, even if it takes years, then you're cut out for this. Do that. There are other ways to do that in the law, obviously, but if you like policy and you think that your work in a way that set to help shape the rules of the city, for a school district, for your state, for your country, then jump in. Jump in and don't be afraid. Oh, trust me, there are plenty of people in there who, you know, aren't working hard or aren't in there for the right reasons. So more light, right, will help eliminate more shadows. And if you can bring light to the equation, I can't wait for you to get there. Yeah.
Yes, do it, for sure. We're going to open the floor soon to student questions and answers, but just wanted to ask if you had any final thoughts you wanted to share, anything else?
You know, I think it's important to say this, even though you're all like already in a high achieving spot by being here. But I know I'm really hard on myself, and I think it's sort of a trait that goes along with people who tend to go to law school, that you expect a lot of yourself. You expect yourself to do really well. And I would just, you know, want to say to you that you don't have to be the top of your class. Actually, ironically, the top of my class here was a person named Ann Patterson, and she's wonderful. We're still really good friends. She works for the governor, and I'm a senator. I'm her senator. I was not the top of the class. And that was okay for me, because I was also working full-time and raising a little boy by myself and trying to figure out how to keep us both fed and alive, right? And so that was enough. Figure out what your enough is, and then be proud of yourself for accomplishing that, for coming as far as you have, for being here, for having a heart that wants to do more to help other people. So I guess the root of that is be kind to yourselves, and don't be so hard on yourself that you prevent yourself from having joy. And as I told one of my staff today, don't let your ambition outsize your joy for the moment that you're in right now. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you. Such an important message and thing to remember as we kind of go forward, both in law school and in our careers. So we're going to open the floor to questions. Please take this opportunity to ask Senator Ashby about her thoughts or experiences, any questions you may have. And Ryder has the microphone. Yep.
Thank you, Senator. I really appreciate your remarks. It resonated with me, and I really get the sense that service to you is a virtue. And throughout your service, whether it be in the Senate or elsewhere, I'm curious, what has been the most shocking thing you've learned or experienced?
Ooh, good question. Well, man, I've been shocked a lot. In the Senate or just in my service in general? The most shocking thing. Well, one thing that I tell people quite a bit is when you first run for office, I don't know about shocking, but it is, you will always be surprised, because you'll have it in your mind, okay, I'm gonna run for office, and you're all studious people, so you'll think to yourself, here's who I think is gonna be with me, and here's who I think will write me a check, and here's who I think will walk precincts with me, and here's who I think will do lawn signs, and you'll get yourself a pretty good list, and then you'll be surprised by who doesn't. You'll also, though, be surprised by who does. And I give you the same advice that my mentor, who's now almost 90, said to me: don't take the highs too high or the low's too low. Try to let the place where you are so excited, let that fill the spot where you get a little bit disappointed. And as Daryl always says, be tough on the issues, but easy on the people, which I think is really sage and good advice. In terms of shocking, I think it's shocking to me sometimes, especially in the legislature, how disconnected some folks can become. And what I mean by that is there are most of the things that come up, reasonable minds could come to some agreement on. Now, maybe there might be some ideological differences where we just never, but that should be a pretty small percentage. But they start to operate, and I think maybe this is especially shocking to me because I'm new to the legislature, and the things that they sort of hold out as truths are not necessarily things that we would hold out as truths. I will give you an example. This is just one example, not particularly the most shocking thing ever, but I'll give you an idea. When I was on the city council, one of the things that happened was we had a lot of problems with law enforcement and transparency issues. And I took some of those on. I was appointed by Kevin Johnson to lead some of that effort, in large part because of my law degree. So there were several black members of the council, and those black members and me became a subsect group that Kevin Johnson appointed. It was really my job to write things in a legal form for the members that had had experiences as black children here and adults in their life. And so I did that. One of the things that came from that working group was putting body cameras on all of SAC PD, which I think is brilliant because you want to have people accountable, you need eyes. You need to be able to see what's happening. So when I got to the legislature, one of the things I told one of my ledge team was, I think Highway Patrol should have body cameras because there's a lot of conversation around transparency and a lot of things that happen that are he said, she said, and if we had body cameras, we would be able to see it. And I was told immediately, no, oh my gosh, do not do that. You'll be made out to be so conservative for that. And I said, conservative? What are you talking about? This is like a actually liberal agenda issue. Nope, because it would force you to give money to law enforcement so that they could have those cameras, and we just want to have a no additional money to law enforcement, which to me made no sense at all. So even if the money is going to provide transparency, good governance, and help us reach a goal of transparency, we're just going to operate under this assumed truth that no new money to law enforcement is the right way to go. I find that shocking. Another one, the legislature does not like to do new harsh penalties, no new felonies. It's like a taboo. Do not bring anything forward that would be a new felony. But at the same time, the folks criticize our existing system as being sexist and racist, which I would agree it is. I think our current system is sexist and racist. But if you agree that the system is built on sexism and racism, don't you think it needs to change? I'll give you an example. If you kick a firefighter in the back of an ambulance, you have committed a felony. If you kick a nurse in the face in the ER, you have committed a misdemeanor. My husband's a nurse. That's why I know this. And he's been kicked in the face multiple times. A misdemeanor means he has to do it all himself. He has to report it, citizens arrest. Nobody's doing that. No nurse is doing that. A felony, it's all done for you. Do you know what percentage of your firefighters are female? I'll give you a hint, it's less than 10. Do you know what percentage of your nurses are male? Not very many. Tell me that's not a sexist law. It has to change, but if you have a system that says no new felonies, do you reduce the firefighter penalty to a misdemeanor? Because that doesn't seem right. But that's happened, not in this instance, but in other cases where you're looking at crimes and somebody wants them to be equal, either for both sexes or all sexes. And so they have reduced a penalty because increasing it for the other group to make them equal was not a reality attainable in the state of California. I find that to be shocking. I think we should take each of these things on their merits. I don't think we should hold such a harsh line that we would say never, or always. I think those are really dangerous words in policy. And I think another really shocking thing is how little power sometimes the legislators have in comparison to how much power unelected staff have. That's a truth also at the local level. I've seen 10,000 people play dead in front of the mayor's house because he wouldn't fire an employee for which he has no authority to fire. In this city, we summarily have rejected strong mayor twice. And yet every protest I've ever seen is rooted in people's misunderstanding that they have placed all of the power in an unelected official and none of it in the hands of the person you think leads this city, which is why I didn't run for mayor and why I did run for senator. And so I think those are the most shocking things. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, Senator Ashby. My name is Courtney Yamagu. I'm a 1L here. I was wondering if there was anything that you did while at McGeorge, either classes or student organizations that you were a part of that you think really helped you pursue your career.
So I was an evening student. Part of why I came to McGeorge was the recruitment from Dean Kelso. The other reason why I didn't stay at Davis is they didn't have an evening program, so that wasn't a possibility for me. I didn't have a whole lot of time for student engagement because I was really working hard and raising my son. My first year here, he decided he wanted to play soccer. It was his first year of soccer, and I'm sitting out at the soccer field with a bunch of other parents, and at the first practice, and somebody shows up and says, your coach quit, so one of you has to coach this team. I'm a first-year law student and a single mom, and there were 2 parents that didn't speak English and 2 other single moms. So the 3 single moms, we got together and said, okay, one was a teacher and the other one was worked in a law office but wasn't a lawyer. And the 3 of us got together and said, okay, we'll just do it together. And so I ended up coaching my son's soccer team in my first year and doing first year here and working full time, which was hard. But I did get involved with the Black Student Association, which was very rewarding. It was unintentional, of course, but ended up to be something that I was really proud of. I helped them start a program called Law Student for a Day, where we brought over a bunch of kiddos from the Urban League, and they had a class from one of the professors on cannibalism, and then we fed them lunch, ironically, and then we let them tour some of the dorms, and the principle, the idea is it doesn't matter where you start, you can end up here if you so desire, and that was fun. And I did do when you start to do oral arguments and there's like appellate arguments, I did international, and that was really fun for me, and I ended up pretty high up in the end there, but I didn't get to travel even though I got asked to go, but because I was a single mom, I didn't go. I did do Inns of Court when I was here, Anthony Kennedy Inns of Court, which was fun. That's how I ended up being a public defender. I met Paulino Duran, the public defender there, and he asked me to come work for him. If you have those kinds of opportunities, I really recommend that you take them. But probably the most fun thing for me was after I graduated from here and got married and bought a house in Natomas and then ended up on the city council. And then the first time that somebody from here came to visit me and asked if they could use my face and my story on some of their recruitment materials to talk about how you could be a single parent and still do well here. And then I felt so proud when that happened. And I've had a number of people reach out to me, students who've been here over the years, who found me online and just said like, hey, I feel like quitting and I'm a single parent, and how did you get through, I've hit this wall, or real property is ridiculous, to which of course we all say, of course it is, everyone thinks that. You're not alone. Just keep trying. You don't really, that rule against perpetuities, you will never use that. So, just get past it. Just memorize it while you need to know it and then move on. It's okay. And I think having the opportunity to be an encourager to people that were experiencing some of the same sort of fears I had when I was here. I Googled when I was here too, like, man, like single parents, moms in law school. You know who I found? Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And that's when she became my hero. She could be a mom, move herself around, even switch law schools because of her husband's career, and still be a great parent and do everything that she did. I could probably get through a 4-year evening program and work with my kiddo in tow. So I used her as my sort of guide light when I was here, but I've been really proud to try to be a cheerleader and encourager to other people that have come through this school too. Yeah.
Senator, well, thank you so much for coming back to McGeorge and speaking with us today. It's been really nice to hear your thoughts on these issues that you're addressing that I think are extremely important. As you probably know, the state Senate is riddled with procedure, motions, rules, and even customs. As a freshman, was there any rule or procedure or custom that you were surprised by or just haven't really liked so far as you're starting your second year?
Michelle's already laughing because I'm an absolute rule breaker. Like, the only good news is as a freshman, I can claim I didn't actually know the rules, which maybe I didn't, maybe I did. You'll never know. But man, I don't know what it is, but as soon as I know I can't do something, I just absolutely want to do it. So the probably first rule that I broke that I caught a lot of crap for, but also don't care and would do again, is that as soon as the Kings were in the playoffs, I wore a Kings t-shirt under my blazer on the Senate floor. And I heard from, ironically, the entire LA contingent. Don't care. There's a lot of rules and of procedure there that I think are unnecessary, but then there's some, and especially in the Senate, right? It's kind of like land of the grown-ups, and I know you probably know this, but I tell a lot of people this story too. There's this, I don't know if it's urban legend, I doubt that it's true, but this story has carried over time, that the legend goes that Jefferson asked Washington, when Jefferson came from France, and said, I get why you have an executive, because somebody needs to be in charge, and I get why you have the people's house, in our instance, the assembly. He was talking about Congress, of course, because that's, you know, close to the ground, and they know what their people want, and they get in there and they're thought out. But why the Senate? What is the point of that? And as legend goes, Washington's answer was, for the same reason that you don't drink your tea directly out of the pot, you pour it in a cup first. It's too hot, right? And I think that's so true. The issues on the assembly floor are so hot you can barely even figure out what to do with them. It's like chaos, yelling. You have to expect to go in there and somebody to, you know, duck for a stapler going by. That would never happen in the Senate. Like, two people start talking slightly above a whisper and the presiding officer's like, calm down, you know, get off the floor. You're like, please, right? So I think of it that way, right? We have this very necessary, scrappy assembly that's just really passionate about all of the things that they're arguing about. Then when it comes to the Senate, it's a far more cerebral dialogue. You can't just get up and start yelling, everyone will ignore you. You better make a good argument. You raise that microphone, you better have something smart to say, right? Because General Roth or Colonel Umberg is gonna stand up behind you and shame you, so you better be prepared to actually make a good, solid argument. Don't just get up and say, you know, my uncle was a doctor, and so therefore I know. You better have something good, right? And I think I like that because the challenge is higher, and I feel like it pushes me to be prepared. So if I know I'm coming in and I'm gonna be guns a-blazing on something, I wanna be really prepared. When I was at the council, I always took this as a compliment, but Rob Fong used to call it the Ashby rule. Like, all I want, I know she's gonna vote against me, but what my goal is to get her not to speak. Because he didn't want me to, like, convince anybody else from the dais, right? And so I told my staff, it was funny, because we already got a couple of requests in our office. Like, we know that it was Becker's office was one of the ones that came over last week. It was like, we know she doesn't like the bill, but could she just not talk about it on the floor? To me, that's the ultimate compliment. Like, that's great. That's what, you know, because you don't want me to try to convince anybody else. So my deal with his office was, okay, I won't speak on the floor, but then I'm gonna vote no. not just lay off of the bill, but I'm gonna actually out loud say no, but that's the trade-off. Probably should have thought about the fact that my name started with an A and, it was an early no. But so what I like about those policies and procedures is they create an opportunity for you to try to find a way to be effective inside of like the constraints that people have been dealing with for decades and decades. And that is, feels like a fun and ironic challenge for somebody like me.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Lacey. I'm a 1L. You talked a little bit about how there haven't been as many women elected. And my first thought was like, are women running at the same rate men are running, or are they running enough? And if not, why not? Like, what really stops women from feeling like they have a place in these elected positions?
Well, first of all, one thing I would say to you is that I think, I think there's a really good chance that this year that the legislature will hit parity. I think the Senate will hit parity. It's close though, and I'm not sure, but that would be a huge milestone for the state of California. There's only a few other states that have even gotten there, so I'm excited about that. I think women do run. I think there are plenty of women that run. There are enough women that run that, we could have more women in office. But there are a couple of things. First of all, you can't just vote for a woman because she's a woman. You can't, identity politics is dangerous. You cannot just vote for somebody because of their identity politics. That's not a good, first they have to be good for the job. And then all things equal, you can pick the people who have less representation. So if everybody's equal, then I'm hoping people will pick people of color, women, people who just aren't currently represented in the same, there's only one black woman in the state Senate. There's also only one black man. And at the end of this year, the black man will go and there's not a single black man running, so there will be no black man in the state Senate for at least the next couple of years after Senator Bradford walks out. Good news, there are several black women running, so the number of black women will, I think, increase. For sure it will, because at least one of them is unopposed. But still, no black man in the state Senate, that's not right. That's not right at all. That needs to be corrected. So you gotta, has to be a good candidate, has to be somebody who could come in and actually effectuate policy. But for women, there are really, I think, 3 problems. One is money. And it's very hard to raise money. It is even harder to raise money as a woman. This may be a controversial statement that I'm telling you, but it doesn't make it less true. The rooms that you have to walk into to ask for money are almost all full of men. So you're almost always running against a man. So you're walking in to ask men to choose you over their peer, which gets a little tricky. And women, I think, have a hard time asking for money too. Men don't feel like they owe you anything just because they ask you for money. Women feel like, ugh, this feels gross. Like if I ask them, do I owe them? The answer is no, you do not. And one trick I always tell my mentees is keep enough money in your account to write a check back. Whatever the largest amount of check that somebody gave to you, never let your account fall below that. Because if somebody comes to you and says, man, we wrote you a check, I'll gladly write it back. Because if you think that any amount of money could buy my vote, you're dead ass wrong, right? And so just always I've never had to do it. I did rip up a check from one person one time. That's a whole story for another day, but that's a different story. But you want to be able to be free and independent. So I think women also suffer from imposter syndrome at a higher rate than men. I know I do. Almost every day that I walk into the Senate chamber, I think, how did I get here? And when they put me on B&P, my literal first response was, what? I can't do that. Do you know how hard that committee is? It's a general does it right now, a literal general from the Army who's like 20 years older than me and has like 40 years of law experience. What? But then, little by little, you start to figure out, you can do it. But I think the world teaches men to just be brave and go in and figure it out. And the world teaches women that you better be prepared before you walk through the door. And that, I think, sometimes prevents us from just jumping in and trying to make sure we have an equal opportunity. So I think those are the things that hold women back it's ourselves in one way. It is our lack of network in another way. It's money in another way. And then the average woman has to be asked 7 times to run before she actually decides to do so. As I say, we need to get better at having the courage of a 4-year-old boy in a Batman shirt. That's the goal.
All right, thank you so much. This is
Yes.
fantastic.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks for spending part of your evening with me. Thank you.
So we have a reception, if students want to come up, we have a photographer here, take pictures, meet the senator, and we just appreciate the gift of your time. This is fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me.
I would love to get a picture if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.